Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome to another panel from the IGDN Summer Series for 2025. This time our topic is, have you tried not crowdfunding? I'll be your moderator today. I'm Steve D. I've worked in the game industry for 25 years as a writer, editor, designer, educator, consultant, speaker, organizer, and publisher. I've won many industry awards for working on games such as Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Vampire the Requiem, Doctor Who Adventures, the Chew RPG, and my own self-published games. My card game, There's Been a Murder, has sold over 100,000 copies worldwide, and my first self-published game, Baby Dragon Bedtime, was funded without a crowd. I'm joined today by two luminaries. We've got Emily Cairboss, who works with BlackGreenGames. She worked on the Romance Trilogy and co-designed Bubblegum Shoe. She writes tabletops, LARPs, and fiction. She's never used Kickstarter, but she has made use of a Patreon campaign to fund a big project. We also joined by Jordan Dube of Goosepoop Games, who's just started his own company last year and has 4 tabletop role-playing games and 4 card games that he has published already for a good while. He was making a living just off selling games at markets and recently funded his first Kickstarter for Zine Month and is planning on releasing 5 more zines for sale at PAX East in May. So we've got a wide variety of people who are getting income from very different sources. What I thought I'd start off doing though is talking a little bit about Kickstarter itself to sort of set the tone of the context. Kickstarter was invented in 2009 and certainly had a huge impact on game production here in Australia, where it's always been much harder to get an audience and to get products to an audience. To date, Kickstarter has raised something like over $8 billion of money. And pretty much consistently throughout the last 15 years, games have been the most common category of projects and the most money raised on that platform. So it's definitely something that intersects a lot with gaming. So why don't we start first, guys, with what has been, some of you have never used Kickstarter, some of you have used it a little. Can we talk about, like, how do you think about Kickstarter? And why you might have or have not used it so far.
Shall I jump in as the non-user?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
Well, one of the major impact issues for me really is thinking about the emotional impact of Kickstarter.
Sure.
It's a real roller coaster ride when you're doing it, from what I observe of friends. And there's a lot of variability in what you get from it at the end. Even if you succeed wildly, it can be rather traumatic. I've known people who have done very well, and then either because the market changed, prices changed. One time it was postal costs changing rapidly. Other people who did really great, and then they had to deal with all the fulfillment themselves and just weren't prepared for the scale. And then on the other side, if you don't succeed, if you don't do it, then, it's not the end of the world, but boy, it's gotta hurt. So for me, I came into the independent role-playing publishing world when we were really getting excited about a lot of ways that we could get rid of some of the risk of independent publishing. You didn't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get a minimum print run of, 1,000 games or more. You didn't have to risk having things sitting in your attic, making you feel bad about wasting money. So I really have loved staying nimble, keeping with small print runs are my love, working with local companies for really quality printing. And then also, obviously, we can do so much just digitally that it has allowed me, mostly to just take smaller bites out of it. And I used Patreon to raise money to do a republishing of three games that I had put out over the years. The romance trilogy. I did a campaign basically where I gave people previews of some of what was going to be in the final book and just asked them to support me, for 6 months or 8 months for however much they could. And that allowed me to pay my editors, pay for my art, do the initial print run, get them their books at a discount, and it never put me in a place where I felt overwhelmed. So
Mm,
so that's where I'm coming from, and I can't wait to hear about both of your experiences.
yeah. I definitely want to talk more about using Patreon a bit later too. Jordan, you have held off until now, but how long have you been working and making money in the industry?
Um, Making money in the industry. I mean, I really just started last year, was kind of my debut. Um, but yeah, for my mindset with like doing the Kickstarter stuff was I kind of felt like I had to have stuff already, that
Hmm.
people knew of, to kind of make sure that I had a Kickstarter that was kind of funded.
Yep.
Um, And yeah, so I didn't want to and a lot of my projects were kind of small at that point. So I was like, I don't want to do like a little tiny thing because in my mindset, like a Kickstarter is like a little bit bigger, or it's like it's got a ISBN or something or fancy binding, like
Yep.
all my like starter games I kind of like folded and printed myself.
Yep.
Besides getting some like card packs ordered and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think I
kind
think
of
what that plays to is that Kickstarter has changed really dramatically in the last 10 years. When I first sort of saw it coming into Australia in 2015 or so, it was still very much focusing on small things, and there was a lot of excitement about really small companies being able to do more and more, and partly, for lots of reasons, partly just the nature or cycle of this. Every time someone's done something big on Kickstarter, the audience has expected more. And what you used to be able to bring to Kickstarter in 2015, you absolutely cannot now because you just cannot compete. And Kickstarter has changed from small independent people trying to reach a large international audience to massive behemoth companies, as you say, presenting a huge amount of very polished product. And I see companies who have obviously spent several $100,000 on their Kickstarters, now. And but I also think that you know it was really transformative for me in Australia. I had ideas about what I could do 10 years ago, but I wasn't sure I could actually, afford it because it was going to cost me $20,000 or something to do a print run of 500 or 1,000 games with the right level of art and a decent print. So we don't actually even have any real commercial printers that can handle small volume in Australia. And I find that my audience is only about 40% Australia as well. So a lot of that issue of actually selling direct overseas was something that was a real big draw. You guys are both based in the US, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, um, well, let's talk about what things cost. Obviously, you've both created physical products. Those are, I assume, soft or hard bound books. Do you guys print locally in the States?
I generally tend to. I kind of did what you did, you were talking about, Jordan, where my early products I kept really small, saddle stitched
Hmm.
booklets really was what I went with. And my prices were like $2 a book for the romance trilogy, three of them for years and years and years. And it never changed because I was going to a nice copy shop that had somebody who was really savvy about illustrations and printing. And then when I finally got into bigger books for uh, Perfect Bound. Um, I actually still worked with them for the initial run,
Hmm.
the ones that went to Gen Con with me. And then when I had wanted to do a slightly larger run for distribution, I went to another printer that wasn't local. But still, it was not a huge company, and
And
they
it's
did a
still in
good
the
job for
US,
me.
yeah?
Yeah, still in the
Yeah.
US. I think they were in the Midwest.
And Jordan, the games that you're selling on now, they're not just zines, they're bigger books.
Yeah, so the one that just launched on Kickstarter or just got funded recently was it's I'm planning it to be like more like a 60 page kind of, it's still gonna be kind of like a soft cover, but that's gonna be more produced. I'm thinking of going through Mixam to get that printed. But yeah, most of them, like when I started, I have them right in front of me. They're just like these little books that
Hmm.
I print. And so I rent a co-working space, so I just go print them downstairs and then cut everything and staple them.
Love it. Love
Yeah,
it. Very punk.
yeah.
Yeah, look,
And zine, it's also part of the zine community, like that's really how zines are as well. And it's got a nice, very like handcrafted kind of feel.
we actually had I did a zine for the first time on ZineQuest on Kickstarter this time, and we did it ourselves. We photocopied and stapled, and we actually had someone write us an email saying, when I got this, I thought this isn't very well done. It looks like someone's done it in their house. And then they said, and then I remembered that's what zines are supposed to be. And so even in Zine Month, we've had this sort of creep where people are in the culture, but they're not really representing that kind of thing in the sense. And do you guys ever feel that there's like it feels very, I feel there's a lot of pressure to try to compete and to show value by matching production values. Is that something that but that costs a lot of money. So is that something that you've struggled with?
I have definitely felt that pressure, right? And I think that's why I've shied away from Kickstarter because I really feel like that's what people really expect. Like
Mhm.
what are the dice that you're going to have that come with your game? What are the nice bags and like all the good cool stuff? And I mean, I drool over it too. I love it, but I don't have the resources to put into that and I would want to do it well if I was going to
Sure.
do it. Like there
Yeah.
is actually a project that I'd love to do on Kickstarter and that book, the form factor, I would want to have all color illustrations that look sort of like fairy tales. It's a game I've been working on for a long time, so I'm still like sorting out the mechanics, but it's one that I would love to have really lush. And so that would make sense to go for that scale of publishing. But other things, black and white interior illustrations seems fine to me, and it keeps your prices really low and could give, really beautiful, like, the Apocalypse World is something that comes to mind with just really high impact illustrations, and they're just black and white done by the author. So, yeah. What are
Jordan,
your experiences, Jordan?
yeah. Have you felt the need to, especially with like more than just zines? Have you done more than just zines publishing? The 60-page book that's coming out?
Yeah, so I also do these card games. So I have like these little 18 card packs right
Yeah,
now. I
great.
have
Nice.
four of those. Um, and yeah, I get the cards printed from the game crafter, and then
Mhm.
I
Mm.
fold up all the envelopes just to save a, a little bit. Um, but I'm trying to. I've just started in my company, so I'm trying to move more towards like the higher volumes of production and more distribution kind of thing. So that's kind of my goal. And what I've kind of realized, like going to a bunch of markets, I also sell stickers. So like that's another thing that has helped a lot. People really like stickers. Um, but having these markets, people, when I say games, people are looking for boxes of things
Hmm.
Yeah,
most of the
there's that
time. Whether
expectation.
if they're not super, yeah, if they're not super into games and stuff where I'm just at a farmer's market. Um, they're looking for boxes of things. So like so for PAX East, I'm gonna put three of my card games together in one box and stuff and see how that does. But yeah, I'm planning to do more bigger board games um next year, hopefully. We'll see how the world is like. Um that yeah, that's my other concern is all those that stuff
Uncertainty.
happening. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
but the other thing is I'm still gonna keep doing zines. Like I I love doing the zines. Like I
it's
did the
great.
five more zines coming out for PAX East, and they're all gonna be like these skinny zine
Yeah,
half page things. Yeah.
go, go.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. But I imagine so that's getting a booth at PAX, right? Not just
Yeah.
sort of.
So I'll have a
Yeah,
booth.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll have a booth and then I'll be splitting it with plus one EXB
oh yes, love their
stuff.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good. That's definitely a thing we should talk about way to make money. But what I
Hmm.
again, this is a thing where I think it's different in Australia. The costs of going to the few
Yeah,
commercial cons we have is incredibly high, and there's
yeah.
even the big companies aren't making their money back on how expensive booth space is. So, what do
Yeah.
you think? What are you guys finding? Are you making anywhere near your money back when you go to a con like PAX East?
Jordan, go ahead. I haven't been to PAX East in a few years, so
Is at Gen Con
Yes.
also? I imagine the costs are quite high.
so high.
Uh
Yeah,
Just
oh
housing.
yeah, I could I could say all the costs. They're really expensive.
you don't have to name
It's
numbers. I'm just
very
like, yeah. Are you going with the
yeah.
expectation to make any money, to make a big loss, to make a little
Mm.
loss? A lot of the
Well, I'm
advice is
hoping to
sometimes,
not shoot for a big loss though.
yeah, yeah.
'Cause-
No.
yeah, I'm going to lose a lot. Yeah.
Um, I know a lot of
You're gonna
people
lose
sort
a
of
lot
go
of money.
like the
No, but
advice is sometimes given that your
Yeah,
your your
yeah.
expenditure at a con is a loss leader that leads to advertising. So some people are like,
exactly.
expect to throw
It's
$5,000 in
marketing.
that hole or something, or
Yeah.
I'm sure the
10,000.
big companies, with massive booths and all kinds of, walls and posters and everything, are investing that money
Mm,
in the marketing. That's what it's seen as, I'm sure. And for us small folks, we just try and, minimize the costs. They're going to Gen Con in years past. I was part of the Forge forum
yep.
back in the day. And so that brought a lot of us together, chatting and sharing our games. And then for many years, there was a booth that we all did together. And that had like, I don't know, 16, 20 artists all together, and we would like schedule things. And, it's a little bit like the IGDN style booth where we have so many of us together. But it was more focused on people demoing their games, which was really helpful, I think, because then people were coming in to see all kinds of things, and it draws in people not just for the games that they know about, but also to find out what they don't know about.
Hmm.
So I think there was a lot of good synergy. It was cheaper, like we were literally like piling ourselves in like 6 to 8 in a room and sleeping on the floor, sleeping in the bathtub. You can't really get away with that these days. The cons really kind of cracked down and frown on that kind of thing. But it was really fun. And you did get a lot of sleep, um but something I wonder what might be helpful or if people are doing is smaller cons.
Yep.
That's something that was super helpful for us. And I know they're still going on, but I'm not as connected to the networks these days. But like we did something called Jiffy Con for about a decade here in the Northeast, and we would have a 1 or 2 day event and hire, we did it in the church basement for a while And a lot of people had kids, so we actually for a while were having babysitters watch the kids in the childcare areas, and they'd like watch a movie or something while people were playing, which was nice because it made it so that people could come at all different levels of, where they were in their life. Because a lot of times you drop out if you have a family. It's really hard to manage that. But that was great. It was, we brought in people who could come in from out of state because they would just stay overnight with people, and it
Mhm.
wasn't expensive because they weren't staying in a hotel. We got to hang out. We would like all eat lunch together, do a big potluck or something, or walk down the street, to go to a restaurant. And it really built the relationships as well. And it also took away any sense of competition.
Yeah.
It was all about like, we're learning about each other's games and supporting each other. And we really built into it wanting to have people bring their games to playtest, which can be so difficult to find people,
Mhm.
outside of your social circle, or sometimes it's hard even to find people in your social circle who want to play your games. And so it was such a lovely atmosphere and very informal. So we didn't have to like feel like there was a lot of pressure. And eventually we grew just big enough that a couple of the stores in the area would have a table, would bring in the games. We were lucky enough to have Jim Crocker here from Modern Myths, which the chain's not around anymore, but I think Jim's still out there, plugging away for indie games. And so he was really interested in bringing the breadth of small press games. And so that supported us and supported them as well. So it really helped, sort of give a good feedback for the
Mhm.
gaming in our region and the designers to do well. So yeah, that's something that I feel like if anybody has the ability to do that, that's a great way to support your own work and build community at the same time. And you can do it again for, low cost, just, rent the local community center hall. It doesn't have to be high budget production, just something that can get you out there. And this is something I was thinking about. I was thinking about this panel. One of the hardest things is getting your games played and then having
Mhm.
people share that, So anything that can actually have people have the experience of your game is really important in spreading the word about it, basically. Things like Metatopia are really great for that, if you're in the playtesting phase. And then all of the wonderful indie game explosion, structures at Gen Con and Origin and other places have really made a big difference over the years in helping people learn about the games. And that's what makes people buy them if you have fun and you hear about other people having fun.
I think that's a really good point, is that we are generally kickstarting is about getting funds, but especially with games, what we're often talking about really is getting people to experience them often first, and that's more of our drive of marketing. And so when we're looking at how do we raise funds, we have to also look about how do we get people playing our games, and that's I guess that's something about Kickstarter certainly it because it's totally virtual, doesn't have a huge amount of access for that. Have you guys done any on that sort of virtual note, done any presenting of your games online to try to actually
Mm.
run games over Zoom or in digital platforms as a way to reach customers?
Yeah,
I see you
so
nodding, Jordan.
when I first started with yeah, Good Soup is my big one. Um Uh, what I did was I got on Threads and just saw anybody who was like talking about D&D or any like RPG. I was like, there's also good soup where you play as woodland creatures, gather ingredients to make soup. And then I just messaged that on everywhere. And I was like, here's the link. And then I found some really great just like there's a big community of players out there who are really nice
Hmm.
and like Role D5. They're really great people, and so they play all indie stuff. And so
Is that a is that
there
a
were
is that an online community
that's like a Twitch, yeah.
or Twitch feed? Yep.
Um Yeah, yeah. So it's a lot of creators and players. So they played Good Soup and stuff, and that's how word got around. And I just kind of made friends with all of them and played games with them as well. And so they were really great. That yeah, I'd say just built the communities. My when I we're talking about digital stuff, but like I go it back to what Emily was saying with local. When I created Goose Poop, I thought just like I want to be really good in this area, like the
Mhm.
city of Portland, Maine. I everybody's gonna know when you come to Portland, Maine, there's Goose Poop here. Um, Not just in the park, but also in the shop. Um, but
That's good
but
marketing. Good job.
yeah. Yeah, I named it after the park that we did the farmers market at, so it's
Ah,
really good.
okay.
Um, um, but yeah, that's kind of just my goal. Is just like think small, think local, and think closer to the community.
Mm,
Um,
that's great.
Absolutely, yeah, okay. I do think though we sort of talked a little bit about this with pressure. Um, there is a as much as people are okay with just putting writing things on a postcard and doing a weird sketch, we do know that nice production values and good layout are important factors, and editors and proofreaders and all these things cost money. We've talked a little bit about doing things cheaply, but how do we some of these things, deserve a professional touch, and one of the things we can't all do these things themselves. We're not all artists. We're not all proofreaders. How are you guys coming and dealing with just not putting on all the bells and whistles, but just making a product look good and look valuable, and having nice art.
Did we lose Jordan?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at my questions. We seem to have lost Jordan. Um, we'll keep going for the moment until he comes back. Um,
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, are you an artist? Are you a layout? Do you have layout skills? How have you solved some of these problems?
Well, I'll talk a little bit. I want to hear from you too, Steve. Um, so one of my approaches has been to build and grow, right? So I started with really small products, simple, self-stitched books that, the first one I literally you know, definitely printed it out in a printer and stapled it and stuff and sent it around as PDF to people. Um, and then I leaned on some friends who were very talented artists who were able to give me really beautiful work and gave me a discount or were able to work with me in terms of, paying over time and things like that. Um, and then I published those games for 10 or 11 years and then put them together in a combined volume that had a more beautiful full color cover. I worked with someone to do the full layout in a more in-depth way. I'd done that, in a smaller way in the earlier ones. Um, and then also invested more in the editing and the overall design of the book. So I started small and got bigger so that I could build, up that. And then also that's when I used the Patreon to bring people in as
yeah,
sort of angels. And for me, it worked a little bit better because I was giving them something for the contributions that they made. It was short term, so they could just pick and choose how much they could give over time. And it made them feel invested in it and
Mhm.
part of the project, which was really important. And it provided me the funds without a lot of risk. I wasn't overpromising and I wasn't guessing about what it was going to be. I just was able to do what I could do based on what money I raised. These days, I'm definitely, I think, looking at the ways that I can continue to provide good quality content. Like I mentioned, you mentioned for me in the introduction that I have been working on fiction more. And my first project with that was a charity project.
Hmm.
Hey, welcome back, Jordan. I just been chatting. You didn't miss anything. Um, and so that was neat to do with friends and to learn about the differences of writing fiction and publishing fiction, figure out all the platforms that are out there. And again, I've been keeping to print on demand. It
Hmm.
does reduce your overall income. It helped that that was a charity project. I've got a copy here. It's an anthology, but it was really lovely. And the person who did the cover art, which I hope you guys can see,
Yeah.
is a really talented fine artist who actually uses pencil and paper and art and paint. And so again, that person was a collaborator who was able to give us really high quality. And so I think the way that I've been sort of approaching building up the money to be able to invest in it is keeping it small still and taking it by piece. But again, I think that you know, um, if I did need to do a larger project, I
Okay.
probably would look at Kickstarter. But getting to that point.
Yeah. I think that what you said about taking time is really important. I think certainly the newest generation of game designers in board games and RPGs are like, well, I've got to have a meteoric rise. My first Kickstarter needs to be huge, and it's really difficult because you actually have to have an audience come along, and you should plan for a longer cycle. And everyone's trying to do metrics. Like if I get 300 signups, I'll launch, and it's like I would maybe wait 5 years or something, maybe to build some more of that familiarity, especially these days. I also like what you said about how your Patreon makes people feel involved. And I think that's what's changed about Kickstarter. 10 years ago, when people were getting on, they felt like they were really being a part of something. Now it's simply customers making orders. And I think that change is really important to talk about because there are still people out there who come in with that sort of expectation, but it is a huge difference in the audience, and
Yeah.
and that affects so many things. It affects how your customers treat you. So increasingly, I hear a lot of people who make games getting tired of how Kickstarter customers are very demanding. I'm not saying they shouldn't get what they paid for, but they have higher and higher expectations and less tolerance for problems, delays, and that's, I think, a really important concern to figure out, like, what kind of audience do I want and how do I want to work with them? And a passionate group of people who want to buy into not just I want to play this game, but I want to support you, I want to connect to you. That audience can actually be really powerful over time and can be that might be better for you long term than getting 500 pledges on Kickstarter, who are just going to say, I want my game and then I want you to bugger off. And I think that's what we might be seeing in as I think Kickstarter's, as you say, changing and people are leaving it. They might be going back to things like Patreon or other kinds of crowdfunding. Can you tell us a little bit more? We'll come back to you, Jordan, in a minute, but tell us a bit more about exactly how you set up your Patreon system. You're talking about people choosing like effectively pledge levels, but short term, because Patreon normally sort of seems like, to me, you just subscribe until you get something like this. Again, there's an expectation of monthly releases or something for Patreon.
It's true. It's true. I was inspired by a similar campaign that Meg Baker did for her beautiful game, and I hope I'm getting the title right, playing the year or playing through the year, and which is 12 different games that are seasonally appropriate that you sort of play at the beginning of each season. And it was combined with essays about nature, and it was really lovely. And she did a short-term campaign to raise money for it. So when time came for me to put my 3 volumes together for the romance trilogy, I thought, well, I really liked the feel of that, where I could put out a short-term Patreon, and I'm forgetting now because it was a while ago whether it was 6 or 8 months, but it was in the lead up to some of the work that I was doing and heading up for the launch. Um, and I just said, this is what I'm working on. And I figured out the different levels. So like everybody got, the text of a section that I'd written. And I was putting like 30 hacks of the games out. So they would get like a game basically.
Hmm.
And then the up, you get for $1, and then for $5 you could get it formatted. And then if you did $10 a month, then you'd get like three or four or more. And it had a nice synergy for me because I got to see that people were interested and got to share it with them, which was really nice, and see how many people were interested. And, it ended up being about a few $100s every month. It wasn't a ton, but that was enough over 6 or 8 months for me to have enough money so that I could, just pay my contractors. But it also inspired me. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, I could do this hack or that hack. And because I had people I was writing for,
Mm.
I kind of did way more than I expected to. I thought I'd have like, 4 or 5 for each of the games, but I ended up having like 10 for each of them. So I think it helped me having this sort of back and forth where I was more inspired to do things because I had the people there, as an audience. And so I sort of thought of it as let's make it easy for people to go up, make each level be just that much more attractive, like you do when you're doing these things. But I think it did work. And then also people did it at the dollar level all the way through. And I was just so grateful that they were interested. And that's totally fine. Just like Patreon lets you sort of have this expansive sort of feel about your audience, and it feels more inclusive.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's how I structured it. And for me, that was a very nice match. And there are some other models too, like the ransom model. I know we were talking about that in the sort of the setup. I don't know if either of you have experience with that or would want to describe that model too.
Yeah, so I've been looking at other models for future games that I'm working on because I can see things changing. We did have some success with Kickstarter. And but our when we did the zine, we were like not getting the numbers and I was noticing things changing. So a ransom model usually happens is that people pledge until you reach a certain level, and at that point the game goes out to all pledges, like a Kickstarter, or it goes out to everyone for free. So it's released to the
Hmm.
world. So people are sort of contributing to get you to a certain point, and then everyone gets it. So that can be a really good community building thing because then everyone understands that the game, what they're contributing to is access. They're not just buying a product; they are really supporting something coming out. So that's something that we are pondering. But I'm also pondering getting some venture capital in. It's a very
Yeah.
small amount of venture capital, but that's how I did my first card game. I looked at how much it would cost to print and ship to me, and it ended up being, something like $4,000. So I went to four friends and I said, look, if you give me $1,000 each, I'm pretty sure I can sell these in a few years and give you 10, 20% interest back. And that was how I got the money. And that was like, we talk about when people hear the phrase, venture capital or angel investors, they're thinking of people who are lending millions. But in this case, I just didn't have, $4,000 lying around as few people do. And people were happy to just go, oh yeah, that sounds fine. You don't want to be careless about that, obviously, because money and friends can be a big issue. And you should put something in writing, even if you don't have an official contract, so that everyone knows exactly what's expected. Uh, but I still to this day get someone who's like, "Oh, is that game still selling that I've helped you fund?" Like again, it can feel very inclusive. They're like, "I'm so glad I backed that. I saw it at the store the other day, and I invested in it, not Kickstarter backed." And yeah, so that's a sort of small scale thing that I've had some success with, and I'm thinking about doing that again because the lump sum for me, who is someone's on a very fixed income, is a huge buy-in, and as shipping costs have gone up, and I can say, look, I can probably cover this with interest over 5, 6, 7 years, And a lot of people will, I think you'll find people who have a little bit of money are often looking for ways to support their friends. Jordan, I know you have like a shared office space. You have, I'm assuming there's some cost with like setting up a business and business name and things like that. Um, was that all just simply funded from your own personal disposable income, or are you in fact drawing, enough money from your sales to fund the company and fund a salary for yourself?
Yeah. Um, I mean, nowadays I also work at another job and stuff as well. When
Sure.
I first started, I was a UX designer as well, so I was working with that. Um, yeah, the funding has kind of just been all myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really a fortunate for the area I'm at, just loves markets. Just every weekend, there's like one market, two on the same day. It's just like there's a lot of markets. It's probably because we're inside most of the year, so the summer is the one time people like to get out.
Yeah.
Um,
Maine's a really good place for tourists too, though. I don't know if that's much of your market,
right.
but like there's a lot of influx of people to Maine in the summer.
Yep. Yeah, so there's that. Um, Going with you were saying the different models. I know Game Crafter has an interesting model where whenever someone um they have their own kind of like little fundraiser thing to
Mm-hmm.
get print on demand for their projects, and
Yeah.
whoever backs it, it's cheaper for everyone. So
Yes.
like
Yeah.
the
So
more copies that are purchased, the cheaper everybody has to pay.
yeah, that's a we should have a name for that, but yeah, that is a really good idea because yeah, they can do the math themselves and go, if we print 100 of these, it's much cheaper for us. Yeah. Game
Right.
Crafter can be a really like it can be a
Yeah.
doesn't always have the greatest interface for sales, but it can be a great place to put your games up for print on demand. And there's other things out there as well. Lulu, I know some people do. They put their books up there, and
Lulu's very good.
yeah, you only need to do a PDF that way for them, and anyone can just send off and buy a copy. Um, but Emily, I assume you're still
I
doing your
haven't
day
done
job.
itch.io.
Yep,
Are either or both of you on itch
I am on
with your
itch. Yeah,
games?
it
Seems like there's like I'm always getting notices about games and updates and things, so I feel
there's
like
a
there's good
there's a
marketing in
really
that
big
platform.
there's a really big bundle market on itch where people just want to be in a bundle
Yeah.
all the time, which helps get the word out about your games. Because anyone who buys into a bundle will not only get your game, but they'll also be immediately attached to your itch release info. So you put out a later game, you'll get that. They also have a huge jam culture. Like there's almost no
Yeah.
time where there isn't a jam going on itch. So if you're if
Yeah.
you're particularly starting out, and also again, the audience there expects you to send them a small PDF, often with not the world's greatest art as well. So that comes back to that thing of sort of the expectation. You're not,
The expectations are low.
but you're not. It means you're not competing with,
Community spirit is
Right.
high.
yes,
They
Yeah.
get it.
um,
Most people that are on itch, they get it. They
yeah,
get like they
and
understand that yeah, it's a PDF. You spend like a day on this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you're
And
not,
there's
yeah,
the community copies
yes.
concept too,
Yeah.
where people can make things available for free. It's yeah, big on inclusivity.
Um, but yeah, am I right, Emily, that you are not, this is not your living, or
Yes, correct.
you have a day job?
Yeah, I really look at gaming as art, not hobby necessarily. I definitely, approach it professionally, but
Yeah.
I've always wanted to have a day job that pays my expenses so that I can have more freedom with the
Hmm.
gaming
Yeah.
and not feel constrained about having to make sure that it's, you know, paying the bills. And that's just a, life balance
Yeah.
equation that worked for me. But I do like to, and also I like to have a lot of my projects give some portion to charity, you know, Romance Trilogy has a local women's shelter and resources group, and then Shanti Bhavan is the other one that I give to that works with folks in India. And so for me, it feels like um, it's another value add. And it makes me feel good about doing it too. So even if I'm not making millions of dollars, at least it's, there's good things happening from the dollars that do come in. There's another one I wanted to mention too is grants and grant funding,
Yes, yes.
which actually came in when I did worked on the When the Rose Speaks Its Name anthology, which was the fiction book that I put out with some friends from a fandom community.
Hmm.
Um, it's all charity. All the money goes to a British charity called ACT that supports queer homeless folks or people who are experiencing housing insecurity.
Hmm.
And so the way that was funded was just us stepping up and doing lots of sweat equity.
Hmm.
And a couple of us had some experience with publishing prior, so we brought that. And then we stumbled through the rest. Um, but we also donated whatever was needed, which we kept tried to keep low. And then for a good portion of the interior art, I wanted one of our artists, our cover artist, also, has a day job, no problem, does this out of the love, and wanted to donate their time, was open to, whatever. But the other artists we wanted to pay because we wanted to make sure that their time was covered and, that they were maybe giving us a discount, but we wanted to make sure that we were supporting these wonderful queer artists that we were working with. And so I had been able to take part in a cultural grant that Massachusetts provides. And this was following the COVID lockdown years. So there was 2 or 3 waves of grant funding that they did where they just solicited it broadly. And it was very like, they made it very easy. Basically, you just had to show that you were doing some kind of art,
Hmm.
somewhat professionally, I think, a little bit, or that it was, something that you do. And then they sort of did a lottery, who could get it because there were so
Yeah.
many people that did. But I was able to get one of these grants, and so I had, some money that I put into this project so that we were able to pay the artist and then not worry about it taking away from the charity income.
Mm.
And so that has made me really interested in thinking about, oh, well, all right. Oh, that's right. I always think about role-playing games as art. I should think about them as art. Like, you're talking about having venture capital or, like the angels for your
Mm.
art, Steve. That's the model that plays run on, right? Like
Right.
theater, that is like as far as I understand, one of the preeminent sources of funding is people you put the money up and then they get a little bit back or whatever. But having patrons of the art is a classic thing. And then also grants. In the Nordic countries, they've been doing this for quite a while, in the LARP community at least, I'm sure elsewhere. But games are a little bit more integrated into how people think about the arts. I think we're maybe getting to that point now. Role-playing games, people don't just look at you with like a glazed expression on their face when you say that now. They go, "Oh yeah, like that D&D stuff." Um, and we probably have the biggest public audience we've ever had
Yes. Yeah.
since role-playing games have ever existed. So we really have some opportunities now. So maybe we should just say, all y'all gamers out there who are publishing, get grants because your cultural councils and they should be looking at it as art and they
Mm.
should be supporting your work and that should be on the table. And since there's a million teenagers in D&D clubs now, like they are also in chess clubs, so it could be the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I do know there's an initiative in I think Spain or Portugal where there's literally a government funded game design commune area basically that you can sort of apply to join, and they will basically cover a lot of your expenses while you just go there and make games, which is amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, I think what you touched on there with sort of the charity thing is it's a lot of work to sort of track down these grants, but try to think expansively sometimes because um, you might be able to get like in my country it's really hard to get funding for certain kinds of arts, like that's just a massively uphill battle. But if you're a small business, there's enormous amounts of support for you. Even if you're not if registered as a company, if you're just registered as a sole trader, like you can get free courses, you can get free equipment, and the government will sort of fall over itself to give you a little bit of money to support some initiative. If you can say, hey, this is a business that I'm running, I'm selling a product. Also, yeah, if you say with charities, identities, if you can show that you're a queer person or a disabled person, not that you should leverage that, but that's a way that you can get funding. I'm autistic, and apparently there's now a push for communities. They're like, yeah, we've got money to give, and communities are often organizations and local governments and state governments are often like, we've been told we have to spend this money. So you're actually sort of doing them a favor when you go in and go, listen, I've heard you need to show that you're giving money to autistic people or disabled people, whatever it is. Here's something you can give me some money towards, and I can show you that it will go somewhere. So that's I think a useful thinking outside the box for ways to get money in. And good to mention plays, like we should look at other industries. Definitely, if you've got anyone working in any other creative industry, go and say, look, can I take you for a drink and pick your brain about how your industry does this? Jordan, have you got any other unusual or out of the box ways to get funding coming in? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't saying anything. Yeah, I think I do a lot of events myself. I have an addiction to just run events as much as I can.
Yep,
So yeah, I like we have our speaking back on like our little cons, like local cons. I
yep.
kind of ran. We had one this past weekend here, and it was just a free con, and people just come and play games all day. But yeah, I'd say uh try to just start the communities in your area and get people excited. Yeah, the running events. I also put my stuff in like weird shops. So I just kind of go, if it's a local shop, I just go anywhere and be like, do you want these zines?
Yep,
Like coffee shops?
yep.
Coffee shops are great. Because people are sitting there drinking their coffee. It's like they look over and they're like, oh, what's this thing? I don't know. But yeah,
Okay.
just
Yeah. That's
yeah, be open to what sells things.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I always tell people that your market isn't necessarily, and probably not, the hardcore gamer. There are lots of people out there who are just going, oh, that's interesting. And people like novelty, so definitely never rule anything out. Look around and see where people are spending money. Yeah. All right. I think that's been a really interesting look at doing things that aren't Kickstarter and why you might. We'll wrap it up there now. You can find me if you're interested on tinstargames.com and TinStarGames on all sorts of social media. And tinstargames@gmail.com if you want to email me. Jordan, where can we find you and your products?
Yeah, you can find all my stuff on goosepoopgames.com, and then you can find me on socials at goosepoop207. And then if you want to email me, goosepoop207 at gmail.com.
Fantastic. And Emily,
You can find my games and everything else at blackgreengames.com. And my fiction is at Shield Crescent Press. Oh boy. .com. It's new enough that I'm still, yeah, Shield and Crescent Press. Yeah, exactly. And my email is blackgreengames at yahoo.com.
fantastic.
And I think that's the best way to find me.
Excellent. We'll also put all of that in the show notes when this goes up. So thank you so much again, Emily and Jordan, for joining me. And thanks to the IGDN for setting up these wonderful talks every year. And that's all from us. Bye.